Good morning, good morning. This is the 11th episode of FAFO Chill, in which the Chainstack Developer Experience team talks about the various things that we've been building and exploring within the Web3 space over the past few weeks. In classic Web3 fashion, we spend a ton of time exploring new Web3 technologies and building various tools, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. FAFO Chill is where we talk about these things and dive into the world of Web3 tech. Today, we have an interesting discussion. For the past few episodes, we've talked a lot about one specific topic, right? So Ethereum scaling or, developer experience or like centralizing on one thing. And then, our first episode was all about the things that we've been building over the past few weeks. And since that first episode, it's actually been a few months, and our pipeline for applications and things that we built has only grown. And, typical developer experience, just mannerisms. That's how we go, right? It's we build a bunch of things and we continue building it, and it kind of expands from there. So we have a ton of tools to talk about today. We want to kind of dive into each of the main tools that we've not only launched over the past few months, but also are currently working on and will be launching soon. So we're going to talk about plenty of alpha and things we're planning to release. Very exciting. I love kind of building these cool tools, and we have some interesting ones to talk about today. But before we dive too deep into that, let's kind of walk through some quick introductions. If this is your first FAFO Chill episode, we typically have about 3 hosts. Actually, over the next week or two, we'll probably increase this to an additional few people. But typically, we have 3 people. Number 1, you have me. My name is Tabasco. My real name is Ethan. I'm the developer relations lead here at Chainstack. With me, I have Ake, our director of developer experience, as well as David, our developer advocates lead. So what's up, guys? How are you guys doing today?
Good. I had my caffeine intake as we were discussing pre-recording. So
I was before the podcast started. It was 45 minutes ago, and I was like, "Oh man, I haven't had any caffeine today. I need to get something to keep going throughout the day." So I got in the car and I drove down to the grocery store, and it was like I was watching the clock. It was like 20 minutes until the podcast starts, and I drove down there, grabbed the energy drinks. I paid for it, and I drove back, and it was last minute, but I got my energy drink, and I'm ready to go now.
Web3 as always.
that's the Web3 way, and that's what you need if we're going to ship 4 tools a month or whatever it is that we do. So I want to talk about a few main tools that we've been kind of developing and are planning to release. Let's start with that. Let's start about the things that we're currently building, because of course these are things that are fresh in our minds. So David, I think I'd like to kind of initially kick it off to you here regarding one of the main tools we've been focusing on, especially over basically just the past 5 days. So to quickly set some context, at Chainstack, we've been very interested in decentralized social media protocols. And as the entire Web3 space has also been very interested in this over the past few weeks, because it's really interesting. It presents a very, kind of nuanced precedent for social media and solves a lot of the existing problems that we've been seeing pop up recently, especially with things like Twitter, or I guess X now is the proper name for it. So decentralized social media has been a major topic. And of course, at Chainstack, as an infrastructure provider, we've been very excited to explore the possibilities of supporting builders that are creating applications based upon these social media protocols, right? So you have things like Lens, Farcaster, etc. So following that, recently we've been diving very deep into Farcaster. Now we're actually going to have another podcast episode soon diving more into this and talking more about Farcaster and kind of how these different protocols compare and whatnot. But we've been really enjoying developing with Farcaster, building different things. We've even started running our own Farcaster Hub, which is a fancy name for a node, basically. And we've been just fully diving into it. We've been FAFOing Farcaster. As we've started essentially deploying our Farcaster Hub, our node, which is like an RPC node, basically, we decided that we wanted a solution in addition to the hub that allowed developers to essentially retrieve data from Farcaster in an easier capacity. So be able to get, for example, my bio or my profile picture or my FID, my identifier, through various different mechanisms, through a REST API, through GraphQL, right? Because as the social media protocols expand, that type of data availability will be key to actually building applications and working with data like that, because social media protocols are one of the most data-rich types of applications that you can build. There's just so much of it. So being able to navigate through that is really important. So to answer this kind of data availability problem that we recognized and that we wanted to solve for developers creating things with Farcaster, recently we started working on the Farcaster API. So maybe David, I'll kind of stop talking here, and could you give us a quick overview of the Farcaster API? You originally came up with the idea, which is awesome. So tell us about it, kind of the problem that it solves and how it works a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the interesting projects as usual. And yeah, I always come up with the idea and then you always bring it to completion. Because in this case, as usual, we are kind of cooperating, and I started it, put together a very rough example, and then I go to sleep because it's evening, and here in the morning I wake up and it's like, okay, done, all good. And I'm like, wait, what? We have a functional API that just needs to be deployed. So that is nice. But yeah, the idea came mostly because, as usual, how we do most of these new things that we FAFO a lot around, some questions started coming up to mind, and I was like, okay, we have these FIDs that are used to identify users and people. How do I get that? Where do I get that from? And how do I know which FID is linked to which profile? And so I started digging into the documentation, and I found out there was this app, how's it called, Searchcaster or something like that. That does something very similar. Yeah, it's using an API in the background, and I'm like,
yeah, by the way,
and it gives the ID, and I'm like, okay, we want to maybe use our node for that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say. So.
Yes,
but maybe we do a little bit of background on the architecture of Farcaster, actually, right? Mm-hmm. Because there has been, interestingly enough, the social media in Web3. The idea was there, and tons of projects, including me working for a project that failed before joining Chainstack. Tons of projects were trying to implement this, and there are different ways of doing this for the past years and years and years, 6-7 years at least. And there's been Steam. You guys remember Steam? STEAM on EOS, Power of EOS, going as far back as 7 years ago, I think. And then, so everybody was always trying to do social media in there. But interestingly enough, in the past few months, I think, right, there's been a big kind of, renewed interest in this. In some of the projects that have been working, they've been being developed, that were developed in the background, like Farcaster. Again, I think they've been around for a couple of years. Very nimble team, 10 people, 12 people, whatever, very agile engineering, which I love. And then, yeah, and all the projects from the background, they kind of came into the spotlight, and one of the, so there are different types of social, like decentralized social media projects, which we're going to go into, on the future episodes. But just some background is, years ago, some of the projects, like on EOS, for example, they would try and put everything on the blockchain. Right, all the data, even all the messages and whatever. Then there are other projects that are like NFT based, where you mint your user ID as an NFT, and you kind of claim it, and then similar to ENS and Unstoppable Domains company. And then there are projects like Farcaster, which prioritize data portability, right? So that you have one kind of user idea, which is FID in this case, which is a Farcaster, Farcaster idea, which is something that you put into the smart contract, registering the smart contract, it just gives you a number. So that way you don't really, cyber squat in the same way that you do with ENS, for example, you cyber squat names. You don't cyber squat anything, I just get your ID on Farcaster, and you don't pay for for all the transactions, which is very expensive, to keep your data in there. All you do is you put your Farcaster ID, user ID, you register it in the contract, used to be on Ethereum and now apparently moving to Optimism. And then for the other, for the actual data, like your messages, since this is social media, main message here, messages, I guess, it's part of a node which is not part of the like layer 1 or whatever, where the smart contract is for this, which is I think I like how simple the solution is, right? You don't have to decentralize like everything, and the node is sufficiently decentralized by itself, I guess. The Farcaster node, but this also the architecture is in a very, very basic overview is you register your user ID, FID, on a smart contract in a layer, in a blockchain network, for example, Ethereum at this point, I think, and then you have your data, which is in a node, in a Farcaster node, and then you can build applications on top of this. You can do it whatever. Like the most popular one, the number one, is probably by the same guys who launched Farcaster, Varun and then Romer and the team, which is Warpcast. But it's like just an application on the Farcaster protocol, on the using the Farcaster node for data, and then there are tons of other applications and they're exploding. Like Searchcaster is also an application which is using just this architecture and the node and the FID and all of that. So that's kind of the portability of it is you just you can do whatever with those, and there are tons of other applications as well. So just giving the background. So yeah, David, that's and Searchcaster, by the way. So since this is a chill podcast, I'm gonna be chaotic as well, as always. But what I usually do, which is really interesting, what I used to do in the past, or I still keep doing for all the Webster stuff, whenever I want to get a product review or a product opinion, or like some fitness opinion, basically the stuff that I do, or an easy AI explanation of some of the terms. Like I've been recently diving into this. I usually search for stuff and then just add Reddit, right, or do site.reddit.com, because I want to see the more on the kind of honest side of the community, how they explain, how they interact, whatever they do. And I've been recently using searchcaster.xyz to get an up-to-date opinion of Web3 stuff. What like when Shibarium launched and they had issues with this, I was thinking, hey, I wonder what the Web3 guys in this on the Farcaster protocol think of this, and all this other stuff, right? So that's my introduction on the background of Farcaster and on searchcaster.xyz as well. So by the way, shout out to the Searchcaster guys out there. And you can build anything on this, right? You can actually go one more step forward, and there's probably already an application on Farcaster for this, I would think. But what you can do is you can put AI on top of this and like, hey, what does just be asking question, what does Farcaster community think of this or that, and just use this, the data in the node that is in there to just give you an LLM answer. So yeah,
that is actually a good idea. let me take note of that.
I'm sure it already exists.
Probably. But yeah, the Searchcaster.
But implemented, it'll be cool. You can actually use LangChain, right?
For
this
sure.
As well.
And the Searchcaster was kind of the inspiration, because I was looking exactly for this type of thing, right? I was like, how do I find my FID? I know I'm in there. How do I know anything? And so I started looking and I found this app, and then I check, this app uses an API and this API uses another API. And I was like, let's just make one for the type of data that we want.
That's actually a great idea. It's a great idea.
that was exactly why I started. It was like, I want to know what my FID is. And so we built an API to find what the FID is. And now we have an endpoint where that allows you to input a username and returns the FID. This is classic dev fashion, right? It's like, I need to do something that it takes 5 minutes, but I think I'm going to spend a week to automate that. And then from there, we can give some extra value. We can index the casts and the messages and whatever. We're still kind of exploring what the possibilities are there. Introducing LLMs and AI into the loop is.
Can we call it? Yeah. Sorry. So it's pretty cool. The scenario is usually a lot of the times, instead of doing it, instead of going and figuring it out. I mean, instead of like FID, instead of just retrieving FID, you can go on the, I guess, use the smart contract, and users can probably, you're just going to spend a lot of time to build a solution for this. we can call it enriched way of doing things, right? Because you learn so much in the process of it as well, and then you can actually scale to other people, right? So this week, then once it scales to 1,000 people, for example, right, using the solution, then all of a sudden it's a lot less spent than it was going to be. Time spent was going to be spent by you initially. Anyway, it's just some comment.
Right. Yeah, it was it was funny. I was doing something. I don't remember what I was doing. I was probably writing some sort of piece of content or something, and David sent a message into the chat. He was like, "Oh, I created this Farcaster API or whatever," right? And I was like, "This is cool." So then that same night, I went in there and I, as I do with everything, I like put a bunch of ideas on a notepad, basically, of things that we could do, because of course, like just being able to retrieve the FID from a username is great, and it's like a simple thing to do. But when you're saying user API, usually you want a little bit more flexibility in terms of functionality. So you want to be able to offer as much value you can within a single endpoint, right? Rather than just having like one small thing. And that way you'll actually get developers to use it. So the thought was, well, let's have this API be sort of an all-in-one data manipulation interaction tool for Farcaster data derived from a hub, a Farcaster node, however you want to say it. Because essentially what we did is we were running this API, and we started running I'm just going to refer to it as a Farcaster node because most people know that term more than hub. But we were running our own Farcaster hub or Farcaster node, and we hadn't exposed the endpoint yet, but we had it running locally on a machine, on a Hetzner instance actually. And what we did is we took the API and we said, well, let's add a bunch of functionality to it. So we added GraphQL support. So you can actually query user data on Farcaster with GraphQL, which is cool, right? So you can say, oh, I want users where their FID is this, right? Or I want like users with bios like this or whatever, right? And you can organize it in a way where you're familiar with, it's just GraphQL querying. It's very simple. And it's a lot more flexible and easy to use and just like do it using different endpoints, right? Because you can basically change one term in the GraphQL query, get a different format of data out, right? Query different data. So it's pretty cool. So that was one thing. And then of course we added like being able to retrieve multiple users, not only through GraphQL, but also through like just an API endpoint. So you can say, I want the first 10 users between FIDs 0 and 10, right? And do it in ascending order, right? I mean, you can do it however way you want. So it's like, it just adds a bunch of extra functionality and flexibility. And yeah, we thought this was pretty cool. We thought this was like, something that you could actually use like in real implementation. So what we did is we took this instance, this API, right, that has all these like cool endpoints and stuff. It's not complete. We still want to add some additional functionality to it, specifically with things like casts or messages or however you want to say it. Farcaster, they have a lot of their own terminology and words that they define for the things in the ecosystem. But we built this out, and we wanted it to use our own Farcaster hub, because a part of the indexing process for this type of data, right? Because essentially what we're doing is saying, well, let's run all these different RPC calls, right? Which is just a call to a Farcaster client, Farcaster node, and saying, let's just grab the user data through it's like maybe 2 or 3 different calls for every FID until we just don't get any more responses. Basically, that was the way that we were doing it. And that's really, that's how you index the data, right? That works, and it'll populate a database with all the data. And what we're doing is we essentially just launched a MongoDB instance that, with a file attached to it, that said, loop through 18,000 FIDs, retrieve the data, log it to the database, and then that's it. The issue, though, is that this is a social media protocol. I can change my name, or I can change my profile picture, or my bio, or whatever, right? The data is mutable. So this means that we can't just have a stock database entry with my profile, because what if I change it? Now that's not accurate as to reality. So we didn't just want to hammer the public RPC with hundreds of thousands of requests every single day, constantly looping through FIDs over and over again. So what we did was we hooked it up to our own hub, our own node, and we did it locally. So the same server in which we're running the Farcaster node, we threw the API in there and had it running on the local instance of the Farcaster node. I hope the words I'm saying don't sound like gibberish for some people, but that's the way that we're doing it, is that we took the API, we're running it locally with the hub, and this means that it's very quick, right? So the latency is really low because it's calling a hub that's on the same server effectively. So this is how we did it, and it works really well. We exposed the endpoint. We're still adding a bunch of different functionality to it. But this is really cool. And of course, additionally, the challenge was still with that, and we talked about this a lot in terms of how we can solve this, but the challenge was with the indexing, right? So it's indexing just based off of a 24/7 loop of RPC requests isn't the best practice, and it's not the best usage of time or computational resources. So we needed an alternative, but with data like this where we don't know what data changes, we don't know when it'll change, right? How else do you do it, really? There's a few avenues you can maybe go down, but really you just have to ask the server, is this data new? Does it conflict with what I have in my database? If it does, if the data we're pulling from the Farcaster node conflicts with what we have in our database, then update it, right? Update the entry. So that's what we did. But still, we were having this script going 24/7 through requests, and even more than that, it was slow because it was running sequentially, which we did a whole video series on this. We have a bunch of articles on this. I love talking about the just terrible nature of running a data test like this sequentially. So we made it asynchronous. We actually processed the RPC requests in batches of 20. So we say, here's 20 requests, then another 20 requests, and then it just keeps going. So it's just throwing requests at the node, but now you have more requests every day. So we're getting more requests through, which means that data is being updated quicker, but we're pushing through double the amount of requests, for example, which is bad because, again, this is not computationally efficient. So what we did is, this might be a juvenile solution. I had a lot of help from, we call it the intern, which is code word for ChatGPT in terms of figuring out the solution to this and coming up with a good idea. But the solution essentially is very simple in that it says we'll only query the data that we have every X amount of minutes, right? Because this indexing process, what it's doing when it's indexing the Farcaster data, it's looking for two things. It's looking for updated information. So it's looking for people that change their name, profile picture, whatever. But it's also looking for new entries. So people signing up to Farcaster, new FIDs being populated with data, right? So you can't just say, oh, only run the request every 5 minutes, because now you're sacrificing the possibility of missing out on new FIDs, right? But what you can say is that, well, there's a higher likelihood that new FIDs will be registered, right? Rather than data will be updated. So what we can do is we can say, well, all of the existing data, right? The 18,000 FID entries. By the way, FID refers to Farcaster ID. That's the term that we've been using. Essentially, it's a representative of your identity on Farcaster. So only query the existing entries that we have in the database every X amount of minutes, every 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? But still query and check to see if there are new entries into the Farcaster hub, if there's new FIDs being populated, right? So now we have this loop that says, it's constantly running through. We use local caching. So we say, have you requested this FID, right? okay, you have, cache it into this local memory store. Essentially, it's just a simple JavaScript map, right? And have basically a deadline on that cache for 5 minutes, right? After 5 minutes, the cache is expired, then requery it again, right? So then it says, okay, it's in the cache, skip it, it's in the cache, skip it, all the way down until it reaches 18,100, right? And now it says, is this new FID populated? Okay, well, it's, we've already gone through all these cache entries, so we don't actually need to make any requests, but there's new FID. So then we make a request. So hopefully I'm explaining it decently. I hope I'm not overcomplicating it. But essentially what it does is, in very simple terms, it reduces the amount of requests that we need to make by only making requests that are likely to have changes in the database, and reducing the amount of requests that it makes that are unlikely to return with a change. So by doing this, essentially what we can say is, well, we're still making a significant amount of RPC requests, but that's the nature of continuous data indexing, right? When we need to constantly update data and get new data, that's what's going to happen. But we've minimized it with this sort of local caching cooldown on existing data. Anyways, that's the approach that we took to it, and so far we're very happy with what the API looks like in terms of its performance, how fast it is. It's super flexible. Essentially, any type of data manipulation you can think of with the user data stemming from an FID or a username, you can query that and manipulate it and mess around with it, do whatever you want directly through the API. So it's actually a very solid API with a lot of functionality. We need to add more to it. We still need to figure it out. I've thought about the possibility of adding messages to it, right? But what if somebody has 1,000 messages and you're indexing a crazy amount of data, and at that you're getting gigabytes of data, which the way that we're doing it, and I've had experience with this in the past, is that when you're saving things in a database, you kind of have two options, right? You can use a remote database. So usually it's a database, for example, if you want to launch like a MongoDB instance on a server somewhere else, or if you want to launch it locally or whatever. Or if you want to use a lightweight database, so SQLite. I love SQLite because I like SQL. Even though it might not be the most secure way of storing data in the world, I enjoy SQL and I think it's easy to work with. Or you can even do something very similar with MongoDB, where you can run a local instance. That's what we're doing. The issue with that, though, is that if you want to start introducing, a gigabyte of additional data from every message on Farcaster and every new message on Farcaster, then you run into an issue, because that becomes a lot to handle in a local, essentially database file. And you start to need to think about entire remote database solutions that can handle that sort of scalability. Anyways, I'm kind of ranting a little bit. This is what we've been doing with the Farcaster API. It's been very interesting, and everything that we just talked about has basically happened within the last 3 days. David sent a message about it on Friday, and then we worked on it over the weekend, and then now it's Tuesday. So it's crazy how fast these things go. But anyways, any thoughts on kind of that, any of those main topics that I just mentioned, guys?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be useful, and I feel like it's gonna be a good way to promote Farcaster in general. We're gonna offer this. Depending on how happy the infrastructure guys are gonna be to host stuff like this, but hopefully we'll be able to have a public instance of those above the node and the API, so people can start playing around and building on Farcaster. It has a lot of potential. It's getting traction, so I feel like being the first, hopefully, will be the first relatively non-name in the industry offering this type of service would be good.
I was on a call today, and this is going to be a little bit unrelated, but it's FAFO Chill, so that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
I was on a call today with everything. It's all on topic. I was in a call today with actually an organization that I did content about last Friday. So I made a video about an organization called Playgrounds, which offers a Python library called Subgrounds, which I'm a big fan of, because I personally do not find it very enjoyable to write GraphQL queries, and it confuses me. So I like Playgrounds, Subgrounds, which is this library that this organization has made, because essentially what it does is it allows you to query subgraphs in Python in a Pythonic nature, if that makes sense. So it converts everything into objects and methods on objects and stuff like that, and functions, and it's very easy to understand for somebody who is native within Node.js or Python or whatever, right? rather than working with GraphQL directly, right? Which is typically what you do with subgraphs, is that you write queries, you push them either through like just, whatever, a request module or Axios or something. But the way that they did it, that Playgrounds did it, is that they do it through converting all of this, like the schema and everything, and they figure out how to do it. Converting the query, like the queryability of that subgraph to Python and making it easy and accessible for most people. So anyways, I made a big video about it on Friday, diving into how to use it. I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm probably not doing a great job of explaining it, but it is a really cool library that simplifies the process of using subgraphs in Python. And I was on a call with them today talking about collaborative opportunities, things that we can do and stuff like that. And they asked me a question that I was surprised to hear. And they said, what is the vision, the long-term vision? What does Chainstack want to be in the ecosystem? What's the long-term vision for Chainstack, right? And I was like, well, that's a big question, right? What is the long-term vision for Chainstack? And ultimately, I think everything we've been talking about today, and everything we're going to continue to talk about, leads up to the answer to this, which is, supporting builders in Web3, supporting developers as they create applications through every vertical possible, and doing so without sacrificing quality of anything else, right? So it's providing consistent support to developers, right? Whether that support is as foundational as an Ethereum node. I mean, this is like what everybody needs. It's like the most foundational component of infrastructure if you're using Ethereum or any other very large blockchain. Like even something as simple as an Ethereum node, all the way up to a subgraph, or like an IPFS gateway, or a Farcaster API, or public RPCs, or the different tools that we made. I mean, we made a million tools, like the Covalent SDK and data APIs, and like the list goes on of like small tools all the way up to incredibly foundational, important tools and components of infrastructure that you use to build your application. And so my answer to them was ultimately that for every developer, right, whether it's an individual developer all the way up to an enterprise, at every stage of development, right? So when you start development and you just need an RPC node to get you connected to the blockchain reliably and affordably, right? We can do this. If you need data indexing capabilities with subgraphs, if you need that type of flexibility, that type of customizability when it comes to the data that you retrieve from the blockchain, we can do that too. If you need file storage, if you want to leverage IPFS, we can do that. If you want to start building an application on Farcaster and you want to start using Farcaster data, which of course is a more niche task and a more niche use case than the other three things I just mentioned, but there's still a base of developers that needs this. We can do that too. If you want to use a data API and leverage it through an SDK format, or if you want to, get faucet funds through an API or whatever, right? All these things we can do, and we can support developers as they do it. So my answer to him was that we already have, and we're continuing to build towards this ultimate vision of being the kind of singular place, if that makes sense, that developers can go to and basically know that they have what they need to build the application that they envision, that they want. And I know we talk about it all the time, and I made a post on LinkedIn about it today, about the fact that we constantly talk about the opportunity that is presented to developers and founders, like the amount of innovation that's possible. But really with tools like what we offer at Chainstack, and really just the incredible amount of tools that are being built throughout the Web3 ecosystem as a whole, it's very easy to build. And really what we want to do as an organization is make it even easier, right? Make it more reliable and not have to wrestle and think about, is my RPC node down, or am I going to have to run a Farcaster node to get the data that I need, or whatever, right? I mean, the list goes on. And these are things that we want to alleviate that worry and alleviate that time spent, so that time can be spent actually building cool things. But that was my answer to them. Do you guys agree with that sort of diagnosis of mission and kind of tying it into what we're building, or not so much?
Absolutely.
Well,
I mean, it's here. You can see it in my background, connecting developers with Web3 infrastructure. But yeah, right. It's for sure.
That's the way to go. That's developers need, and I see it all the time. I actually had a meeting with one of our current customers from Orb Labs. I talked to them last week, and we had a big conversation about developer experience and developer tooling and what they need and what they see in the ecosystem. And I see this repeatedly, and I saw it from them too, is that a lot of people, like Web2, like developer tooling and developer experience is significantly better than Web 3. It's undeniable. And the reason for that is because Web 2 is, more developed. There's lots of money in Web 2, and it's been being built for years and years and years. Web 3 developer experience is super underdeveloped compared to it. Like I was talking to like I mentioned, the Orb Labs guys, and the main developer I was speaking to primarily came from like Web 2 infrastructure management and stuff like that. And the developer tooling and developer experience side, when you're coming from that part of the space, is pretty, you come to Web3, you're like, wow, it's a little underdeveloped here. So, just the fact that two people, two developer advocate and developer relations can make an API that meets a need that hasn't quite been met yet throughout the ecosystem. The Farcaster API, this is crazy, right? Anybody can build something because there's so many things that need to be built to improve developer experience. So I think in general, building towards these things are really important. And we've continued to build beyond just the Farcaster API. I guess I want to move on to kind of use this as a segue to a few of the other developer tooling, developer facing applications that we built recently. But I guess, David, was there anything was there anything left that you guys wanted to discuss about the Farcaster API or the Farcaster Hub before we move on?
No, not really. Not from my side. It's been
David?
put well enough.
Sounds good. Went over everything.
Well, then,
as usual, we're gonna think more things. As the time goes by, we're gonna, brainstorm more stuff. So
yeah, it's every week we talk about it, like how significant our developer projects Notion page is getting, but it's bad. It's we're always like in DMs. It's like another thing to add to the list, and I have a million lists because, like I mentioned, there's just so many solutions that can be built. Like in Web 2, it's not the same environment where, there really isn't a million problems to be solved. Like everything's like super streamlined now. Maybe a few things, but like everything that can be solved and every need that can be met has already happened in Web 2. Like it's the gold has already been mined. So there's plenty of it in Web 3, which is, that's why there's so many projects to be built and so many ideas out there. But I want to talk about, I guess it's up to you guys what you want to talk about next, but there's a few kind of directions that we can go here. Number one is David, I actually want to learn a little bit of a pivot here. But I know that recently you've been working on a few different plugins on ChatGPT, two actually, of course, Aerodex, as well as the new one. I forget the name of it, but it was like YouTube videos or something like that. Tell us a little bit about that and about your building experience with that. And I know that we were talking recently about plugin labs, stuff like that. So let's dive into that briefly and talk about some of the ChatGPT stuff that you've been making recently.
Yeah, let's do it. This is the usual path with me. I learn something new and then I try to build something about it. I started with the Aerodex plugin to just get some simple aviation weather data, since I am kind of deep in aviation. And I'm actually surprised. I've been logging, the queries coming through, and I'm actually surprised that people use it. I get at least, 5, 6, 10 queries every day on the plugin, which is of course not a lot, but it's the first application I made.
As usual, some background on there, because you guys aren't famous enough. But yeah, I'm just gonna give some background because.
Go ahead.
David is a pilot who also does Web3, who also does AI, right? So that's why David was interested in, mentioned in flight information. So,
yes. So I still keep trying to tie aviation into what I do, and I figured, why not? I remember this kind of aviation stuff in the past couple of years. The ways have improved quite a bit, have changed a little bit, but yeah, to give a little bit of context on this, I went over the aviation weather stuff, because the aviation weather systems used, in the US, and I guess a little bit all over the world, those are super old. Like these aviation weather reporting systems and how they are encoded and distributed, those are like 60, 70 years old at least. And we still use them today pretty much as is, because
they are reliable though, or not?
They are.
No point in updating them, I think, right?
Yeah, I didn't explain it very well. Of course, how they collect the data, it's of course modernized and updated, but it's how they distribute it. Because of course, when these things started, they didn't have the same technology, the same capability we have now. They didn't have the same bandwidth to send messages and stuff. So everything is kind of encoded. So for example, when you tune to, or like you get a weather report from an airport station, it's gonna be encoded in like some sort of gibberish. It's not complicated to understand, but for someone starting up, it can be intimidating, right? Something like ChatGPT allows me to query the aeroweather.gov API, which aeroweather.gov is the official source of aviation weather from the government. And they actually offer an API, completely free, completely open. It's kind of experimental, but they have it, and I found it completely randomly. And ChatGPT allows you to query the API, get the data, and it decodes it and explains it in real words, So what you can do with this plugin is say, hey, I'm flying from, I don't know.
That's cool.
I'm flying from Denver to Colorado Springs. Can you give me some forecast or something like that? And it's usually smart enough to understand which airport codes to put in, or there is something that actually the FAA was pretty smart into implementing called the aviation forecast discussion, where it's not a machine making it, it's an actual person writing this forecast discussion in like real human words. So they kind of summarize what's going on in the area, and it can pull that too. Yeah, it's just something to get people into understanding things a little bit easier. Obviously, I wouldn't probably rely on it for actual flight planning.
What's the name again? Aerodex.
Aerodex, yes.
The .xyz.
Yeah, .xyz. And I don't know how people find it.
It's so funny that you had to use Dex. I'm gonna mention it again. It's like you're Web3 first. It's another Dex for anyone listening out there. But
how I came up with the name is that I explained ChatGPT what the plugin does, and say, hey, come up with a few interesting names, and that was one of them. It's like, this sounds cool. Let's do it. And you get some requests actually. People find it and use it, and it's interesting because I wouldn't. ChatGPT Plus with the plugin integrations is still something relatively developer focused. I wouldn't expect people that are into aviation also being into development. It's kind of a interesting combination.
That's dope. You said 5 to 10 requests a day on the plugin?
I think so.
That's not bad.
No, that's pretty cool.
It's not much, but it's a few.
Yeah, but
more
it's
than
not
I
like
was
you've marketed
expecting,
it
to be honest.
or anything.
I know, I shared it a
like
couple times on LinkedIn, a couple times on Twitter, and that's it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's dope. That's a pretty solid way. Yeah, it was like Ike was saying. It was a pilot developer advocate and a 17-year-old developer relations. That's that's the Chainstack way.
With the
paid. I was thinking about talking about it today.
Yeah.
I've made some pretty solid progress in that. But yeah, it was the Aerodex. I remember testing it when you first released it. It was dope. It was a very good use case for ChatGPT, and I think a lot of the time people shoehorn ChatGPT into things that doesn't make sense, or just like ChatGPT exists.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's so many plugins that do that. It's just like it makes no sense, right?
It's like
especially
it's like releasing a coin for everything in like 6 years ago or whatever. Now it's just
what about coins for
like
people?
API, and
FriendTech. I see it on the timeline all the time.
There was a subtle reference.
I haven't even opened the site yet. Yeah, I've stayed away. I understand it a little bit, but it's it's kind of crazy.
I have it.
Have you used it?
I didn't.
Someone bought my shares and then they sold those for like $2.
Nice. Nobody bought my shares.
I think it's mostly bots, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
It's like that platform's insane.
I was just
apparently-
exploring. Yeah. What
Yeah,
I like.
apparently they
What I
actually
like.
have an API.
Oh really?
Really?
Oh
They
yeah,
have an
because
API.
they have FriendMax like BitMax type of like they have something where you can trade shares. I think.
Yeah, they actually have an
When I-
API.
when
I
I-
found
when I
it.
was exploring FriendTech a couple of weeks ago, when I got into it, what I liked about them is they are a PWA. It's just a progressive web app, right? That's for years I was trying to. I kind of for years I thought that's the way forward would be for applications and specifically web apps that do Web3 in a way that you bypass the Apple App Store, right? You just you just launch your website as a progressive web app, which is something that Apple, even when Steve Jobs was alive, they started developing it to be supported natively in iOS, right? And I was always surprised that it wasn't spread as much. And then I saw FriendTech do this, and I was like, yeah, guys, this is cool. All the other stuff I'm not sure, but kudos for being a progressive web app. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's dope. It's I on Twitter, of course, I probably spent an unhealthy amount of time on Twitter because it's just my favorite social media, even though it's not perfect. But the entire timeline has been FriendTech. And I see it, and I understand I understand like the ethos of buying other people's shares, but I have yet to sign up because it seems that there's a lot of drama. It seems very dramatic, the whole FriendTech thing, and it's creating a lot of like volatility on the crypto timeline, which is crazy. But it's crazy. People are launching their accounts, and then I guess it's mostly bots are buying their shares, pumping their shares up. I don't know. They probably don't make that much money. I'm sure it's just a few $100s, but then they dump it, and people are making a crazy amount of money just like running bots for FriendTech and taking profits and stuff like that. But it was an interesting concept, and I was telling David, I could have sworn there was something very similar in Web 2 that didn't use Web 3, but it was also like buying like representative tokens of influencers, of celebrities. I don't remember what it was called, but it was in Web 2.
Oh, really?
I think it failed pretty badly because it was a little bit Ponzi scheme-ish, and I think FriendTech reminded me of that.
Yeah, I'm kind of yeah. Well, I didn't know it existed in Web 2, but I'm kind of getting the feeling whenever there is a word influencer involved, it's going to end up badly. That's. I mean, if there is one example of this not turning out to be true, I'd like to hear that. I'd like to see that.
Right.
But yeah.
The good thing is though that the FriendTech discussion, even if it's kind of an application that maybe won't last that long, maybe it will. Maybe I'm totally wrong. I don't know though. We'll see. Maybe it'll be like the flagship social app.
I mean, Bankless is doing stuff on it, right? So. Is getting the Bankless. I don't think Bankless is listening to this or will ever listen to this episode. But you guys are mainstream now. You guys are mainstream in crypto. It's like Bloomberg covering like Facebook when it started or something like this. It's Bankless, green lights and FriendTech to the mainstream Web3 audience. So
right,
that's surprising. That. Yeah.
They have insane reach and influence now. I was, their CTO. I was on a space with them not too long ago, and on the Build a Space, which is a website that basically aggregates different Web3 projects. And I was on a space with him, and just recently I sponsored his GitHub profile, which is a cool feature. I don't know if you guys have used it before, but on GitHub you can sponsor people.
Yeah,
it's like tip people basically. You can say, here's $20, here's $15, something like that. And I did it on one of the Paradigm guys that they manage WAGMI.
Oh, wow.
Every once in a while, when I see somebody very active on GitHub, I'll throw them a quick sponsor. But yeah, I was the Bankless CTO. I just want to remember there. I just remember that. But they're doing crazy stuff. They're like I think I don't know. I watch a lot of TikTok, and every once in a while I see an advertisement that's Web3 related. But my feed almost has no Web3 stuff. Very often, very rarely it does, because it's just not super popular on TikTok. But every once in a while, I'll see an advertisement like from Ledger. They advertise very heavily on TikTok, and I could have sworn I saw something similar, maybe about Bankless, not too long ago, somewhere on TikTok, which is interesting because it's like it feels like two different worlds almost, right? When you're on those very Web2 like mainstream social medias like TikTok or whatever, and then Web3 stuff pops up, it's like, oh, my world is like merging with the typical like normie world, if that's the right term to use. It's so early though, because it's the amount of Web3 content, or like you realize nobody knows what any of this is. It's like we live in such like an isolated community in Web3, where it's like there's so few people. It feels like sometimes there's a lot of people, but really there isn't. But I think Bankless is doing a pretty good job of like, it's almost like a household name at this point in terms of Web3 and anybody remotely interested in crypto. So they're doing some pretty cool stuff. I'm not too sure about FriendTech. I'm torn on that, on the the viability of that. But go ahead.
Yeah, but Bankless are very cool, and they pulled it off with a generic name. A name as generic as Bankless. I mean, it's good stuff. Yeah, the guys did great. I listen to them very often because they do a very, very good job of explaining things, and also they do it casually, so you can kind of fade in and fade out. And they have the guests that normally I think they have the highest density of Web3 useful people on the media. That's Bankless are cool. Bankless are very cool.
Yeah, and they're killing it always. I was very surprised to see that their some of their like their CTO doesn't have a ton of followers. Like I think he has like 10K or something. I don't remember what their main account has. What is it like? Is it over 250,000 now on Twitter?
Probably. I'm sure. Yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, it's by far. I think he did a good job. Like the parallel to Bloomberg almost for like traditional news. Bankless is very similar in that. I need to listen to some more of their stuff. I've been, I see it on the timeline all the time, different podcasts that pop up. There's a lot of them now. There's a lot of Web3 podcasts. Yeah. And I'll listen to them, and a lot of them are really good. A lot of them go into it, but Bankless is kind of the most infamous, original like Web3 media outlet, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I should disclose this, but I do. So I'm in all the different Web3 communities, including the Bees board of 4chan. And they have this funny meme on Bankless is if a project pumps, they're like, has this pump been approved by Bankless? So, no, Bankless is going to be angry because this pump has not been approved by Bankless. So it's just too funny in how mainstream Bankless is now, in how it's viewed by people. It just went from little known to the number one, probably. Yeah, like for sure number one podcast in Web3. So yeah, cool stuff.
I see. It's funny, the Solana community. I love the guys over there, but they're very aggressive towards anybody that has an anti-Solana opinion. And sometimes, I don't know if it was Bankless. I think it was. Maybe it was their CEO. It was somebody related to Bankless that posted something on Twitter. It was about Solana. It was probably something. It was probably incorrect, to be honest. But they posted something about Solana, and the community is very, they attack whenever somebody says something incorrect or inaccurate about Solana.
Yeah, but to be looking down on Solana, that's one of the things I never really like. This it's just and calling SQLana, SQLana, whatever. I just hated this. When it's like, again, I think we discussed this, but it's. If you go back in time when Bitcoin was was around and Ethereum just started, Bitcoin was always Bitcoiners. I think probably to this point, but then it was more prevalent. They would always look down on Ethereum guys, call them meth heads, call them whatever, right? It's vaporware. It's never going to launch. This and that. Vitalik is a Bitcoin magazine editor. Why is, and then And Ethereum were like those progressive guys that were like, wow, yeah, we're doing cool stuff, always inspired. And then you know, a lot of Ethereum crowd turned into like with Solana again as well. They're like, yeah, we are the cool guys, you know, we are the OGs. Solana is not an OG, you know, and any of that. But if I like when you launch from scratch, like from zero, build a project that's so different, and it's transacting billions of dollars, millions, billions, I don't know how, you know, of dollars. And you have the, you know, the attitude, the kind of, you go and launch it, and you say, you know, you say it's beta. They always had this warning that that's all beta, and kind of you have the audacity to do all of that. It's for sure. I think nobody has, you know, nobody should be. It's just this like intricate, sophisticated technology that you were able to pull off and launch and do this successfully enough that it, you know, it transacts the value of hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars. I don't think anyone, not even consensus guys or Vitalik, and they would probably never do this to look down on Solana, right? It's a smashing success. If I were to do this, I would probably not be even able to handle the you know, the pressure of it, right? To knowing that you're one of the people maintaining you know, this blockchain network, and there is just tons of things involved in this. Security, it's real money, it's real finance, it's real everything. I would probably not be even able to sleep at all. It's just crazy, and you know, nobody. I don't think anybody in the world has the right to look down on Solana, and especially make a meme as bad as you know, SQLana. It's just bad things. Yeah. So yeah, that's it was. I was always boiling. You know, I was like, whenever I see this. Now we have this platform FAFO show when I can, you know, can say it out loud publicly. It's so yeah.
Right. Yeah, the Solana, and you know, it feels, I think a lot of the reason why people typically dislike Solana, and also aversely, I think the reason why Solana typically dislikes Ethereum, it's like a rivalry almost. Like both ecosystems are always at each other's throats a little bit. If you look on your Twitter timeline, and if you follow any like major Solana guys, you'll see like it's lots of arguing, which is funny. But in general, like if you take like the communities away from it and take away like, and it's tribalism. This is at the core of lots of crypto. It's like runs the community basically. It's always been present. Like, you know, the Bitcoin Ethereum thing, different coins that compete in the same way. It's always just like, here's my group, and I don't want anybody else.
Xbox, PS4, Nintendo,
exactly.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's
PC.
Everybody likes to box themselves into a community and like refuse, you know, input from anybody else, which is fine. You know, that's how communities grow, and that's how you create a loyal base of people using your product. But my recommendation would be anybody that uses EVM, and I love EVM. I would probably say that as a developer, I would prefer to build on EVM just because I'm familiar with it. I think the developer experience in EVM is really good. It's usually very simple, but Solana is very comparable, and they've made a lot of really great strides in improving developer experience. And I think as a developer and as a user, if you have never used Solana, if you've never tried to build something on Solana, you just go over there and set a transaction, right? Conduct a swap. Create an NFT, create a compressed NFT, something like that, right? And just look at what it's like, and it is like the epitome of night and day compared to even scaling solutions for Ethereum, even things that are supposed to be fast, right? Like whatever, a million of them. We just talked about it on the last episode. Even if you compare those to just like base layer Solana, the experience is massive, right? And of course, they have their different places in the ecosystem. I'm not saying that Solana is the you know, silver bullet of blockchain, but there's something to be considered there when the experience of using Solana is a massive step towards what we're used to with blockchain. The transactions they feel instantaneous usually. The gas fees are almost usually none unless you're doing something crazy and like deploying a program or something. And all this, you have the technologies like compressed NFTs, which I made a big piece of content about this not too long ago. actually just last week, I think, last Wednesday. And this technology allows you to mint thousands and thousands of NFTs, 5 figures in NFTs, for like $100 or less. I mean, this is crazy. This is like on Ethereum, like you can maybe mint 2 or 3 NFTs for $100. On Solana, it's thousands and thousands and thousands, which is crazy. And the technology is very complicated. It's very intricate. It's super multifaceted. I barely even understand it. There's very few people that do. But that level of complexity and what they've achieved in Solana is really exciting. And it enables a lot of not only cool user experience, but it opens the doors for building applications that were previously not possible or not practical on EVM chains. Like, for example, this thing that I patented not too long ago that I work on the weekends whenever I have some time. This is essentially, without getting too in the weeds, it can be kind of hard to convey it sometimes, but essentially what it does is it enables you to make transactions, be identified, and do on-chain activity physically in the real world with a public and private key tied and mapped to biometric features. So your face, palm print, stuff like that. Those things are directly in theoretically in a decentralized manner mapped to on-chain identity, and this allowing you to conduct transactions, prove that you own an NFT, whatever, all through physical features, right? And this is what I've been working on for a long time, very lightly on the weekends, basically. And on the weekends when I'm not working on our Farcaster API or whatever else we're building. And with that, I thought for a long time on Ethereum this would work, but imagine you want to go to a store, right? And like, let's say you wanted to use this model for processing payments in Web3 that I'm working on. And the idea is that you'd walk into a store basically, or wherever, physical location, and you'd be able to pay with the same experience of like today you have like tap to pay with your card, right? I just used it before this podcast to get energy drinks at Safeway. I used the tap on my card, which is you just tap the screen, it's great, and it's done, and you walk out. It takes like 30 seconds, right? So the idea is creating a similar experience, but through biometric features, so you don't even need a card. You don't need anything because everything's mapped to your on-chain identity. So imagine being able to walk into Safeway, for example, right? There's 20 minutes until FAFO Chill starts, and you need some energy drinks. And this is what I was doing. And let's say you want to do that with Ethereum, right? So the idea is you walk up to like a checkout thing, whatever, self-checkout, for example, it can work with normal cameras. And in this case, with the proof of concept, your private key is mapped to your palm, so you authenticate whatever, sign whatever transaction you want, and the transaction goes through, and you've paid with nothing more than moving your hand, basically. And this is very cyberpunky, but it actually works, and I have a very solid proof of concept now that runs on Sepolia. Now, the issue with running it on Sepolia or on Ethereum is that these are slow, right? So, okay, you send a transaction, now you're going to wait there processing for, sometimes, depending on the network conditions, it can be a significant amount of time. And this just kills the entire experience. It's like, well, why even do it? At this point, I'm just going to use my card, right? So you're not even competing with traditional payment mechanisms. So the solution to this is Solana. I hate to say it. I know some EVM people won't like to hear that, but it's the truth of it where, there's really, maybe there's some rollups on, like Arbitrum has a similar finality time. Arbitrum is very quick. I was super surprised when I used it not too long ago and was actually building an application on Arbitrum. It is very, very quick. So like that could probably give you a parallel experience, but on Solana, you have the full package of the almost zero fees, the virtually instantaneous transaction, and it provides a very Visa-like Web 2-like experience that you don't get on Ethereum, or you don't get on even like Polygon or something like that. So long story short, that's why I love.
Just a quick note. Solana is already decentralized, right? And Arbitrum is just a sequencer. Well, not just a sequencer, but transaction process through the sequencer. So when the sequencer gets decentralized, maybe in the future, it might not be as quick. It's just a quick observation. So Solana just makes sense. Really makes sense. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We posted a clip today from our last conversation where I was talking about the centralized sequencer of Arbitrum, and it's not the best long-term solution for stuff like that. And definitely they have a solid path to be fair for decentralization, and they want it to be centralized because they want it to be decentralized because they understand that having as a foundational component of the kind of blockchain infrastructure as the sequencer, having that centralized is a point of failure, right? And of course, with blockchain, you don't want that. So, anyways, yeah, that's Solana is a very cool solution for building applications, and it can enable a lot of really cool things that were impractical on traditional solutions. And again, we talked all about this in the last episode, kind of the battle of the blockchains, and figuring out what'll eventually work and what'll host the billion users or whatever. But I think in general, I'm a big fan of Solana, and I think that if you have never used it, then just go over there, create a Phantom wallet or something, and send a transaction, right? And if you want to dive into it further, build some scripts. We just released a bunch of recipes on the Chainstack docs.chainstack.com/recipes that go into Solana development. So there's various different Solana recipes on there. You can basically copy and paste them, throw on your Chainstack endpoints, and get started building on Solana, interacting with Solana programmatically. So anyways, it's all very cool. That was my kind of experience building with Solana.
A quick note again, for sure, how great, where Solana is. If you've never experienced Web3, the 3 protocols that you need to use just to get a feel of what Web3 is Bitcoin, of course, Ethereum, and Solana. That's where Solana is, right? It's it's just the top 3 protocols: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, for sure.
And we could have a whole conversation about Bitcoin. That's a whole thing in itself. Yeah. I have some opinions on Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin.
Yeah, but I mean, to get some OG experience, right? Just for like, if you were to walk into some interactive history museum, right, and just to get exposure to the main visions or the main whatever, Web3 would be Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. That's what I think.
Yeah, sort of like the evolution of blockchain technology a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not. Maybe Solana is not the evolution. Maybe that's not the way to go. But I think there's lots of solutions that aim to be the kind of next step past Ethereum onto something that's suitable for a lot of people. Solana is one of those. Just it's not tethered to Ethereum like a lot of the other solutions are, like the rollups, like the layer 2, stuff like that.
Right.
That base themselves off of the fact that Ethereum exists and off of Ethereum's tech stack. Solana is, of course, completely isolated in that case. Except for things like you have Neon EVM, which I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but it's essentially a way to interact with Solana via an EVM, kind of like a Solana rollup almost, but interacting through.
Where's that, by the way? I don't hear often about that.
They had their big announcement, and then it. I tried it, and it's pretty cool. I don't understand exactly how it works. It feels like very similar to a typical like layer 2 rollup like Arbitrum, where it's you send a transaction and there's like a central like contract or sequencer or whatever you want to call it, like some master controller for pushing these transactions in parallel to Solana. It's very similar to like something like Arbitrum or Polygon or something for Ethereum, at least from my very juvenile like understanding of how it works. But it's pretty cool. It's a cool solution for anybody that wants to build applications in familiar environments on EVM that can be leveraged through Solana and, taking advantage of Solana's tech stack. Because personally, of course, I learned on EVM. I would prefer to build on there because I'm more comfortable with that. But, there's a lot of people that start, and I'm seeing it a lot today. There's a lot of builders that start their journey on Solana and they don't know how to build EVM. They have no idea. If you tell them, how do you do this on Ethereum, they'll look at you with a blank stare. And the same thing would happen if you asked me a lot of things about Solana development. Of course, I've had the opportunity to learn a little bit about it, but still there's some complex things that only the guys that started on Solana really understand. So it's a different world, but it's awesome. I love it. All right, so before we start to wrap it up here, guys, any other major topics? Of course, there's a massive list of tools. We only hit what was it, 2 or 3 of them? I have like 20 of them here on my list, but was there any other key things you guys wanted to hit on before we start to wrap it up here today?
No, not really.
I don't think so.
It's a good episode as always.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. This was episode 11 of FAFO and Chill. We post these videos every week on Friday, and essentially, if you made it to the end, then you understand. These are very laid-back podcasts where we kind of talk about various different things in Web3. Today's episode was about different things that we've been building, specifically Farcaster API, Talked a little bit about like the biometric project that I've been working on, the patent that I submitted. Talked about different blockchains, Solana, EVM, etc. A million topics as usual, kind of all over the place, but it was a very fun conversation as always. This episode will be posted this week, and if you'd like to stay tuned for episode 12, that'll also be posted next week, hopefully with some guests. We'll see. It should be a very interesting episode. Definitely keep out for that. And I think that's about it. Thank you guys.